I'm Alli Shaw. I'm the director of Prosper Project. So many of you have recently become adults, and you're being told to do at least three things. You're being told to work hard, get educated, and be responsible. Those are all incredibly good things and indisputably necessary to succeed in life. They really are. But the problem is that because of economic realities beyond your control, the roadmap you've been given for success is not enough anymore. So it's not enough to work hard when your money buys you less and less, no matter how many hours you put in. It's not enough to get educated when your education leaves you in debt for the rest of your life. It's not enough for you to be responsible when the people owning the systems are acting irresponsibly with them. So, what can you do about all this? Well, first you have to name the problems in order to explore solutions. And that's what I'm here to do in the Prosper Project. Name problems and explore solutions. So we'll start with the very foundation of economics. Intrinsic human value and the problems that arise when that value is dismissed by the systems we create. So, okay, don't freak out though. I know I mentioned economics, but I promise I am not going to lecture you on the technical definition of economics or how data is quantified or anything like that. I will leave that to your college professors. Instead, I have a story. And I have a story to share with you about how I've seen economic decisions play out in real time, impacting real people. And I've held this story in my heart for over 20 years because it's a story about people and value and the systems that do and don't recognize that value. So let me start with what I remember from that day. The day I was faced with the tragedy of a system that didn't recognize the value of human beings. I remember my rusty bike clanking down the road. I was hiccuping over bumps as I weaved through a sea of man-powered and motorized wheels. I remember leaving the orphanage after my weekly visit and entering the fray of traffic, but honestly, I have no memory of that ride back to my apartment except that numb attempt to jump in the fray of all that traffic. I'm sure I passed the same women lounging under hot pink lights, and I'm sure the men shouted, "Hey, American," as I launched by. And perhaps I waved and smiled, or maybe I didn't. Maybe I stopped by McDonald's for supper, because as you can tell, this was not in the US, and that would have been a rare treat. Or maybe I nibbled on roasted peanuts, dragon fruit, and oranges while returning the blank stare of my apartment wall. But I do remember arriving at my apartment a different person than when I left. Perhaps better, perhaps worse, but indisputably different. Earlier that day, I visited a local orphanage, and the visit began like any other, with a flurry of noise and immediate interaction with the children. The orphanage housed beautiful children who, despite mental and physical struggles, simply desired life and love. But those desires couldn't overcome the conditions they lived in or the lack of resources that they had. So I was about to conclude my visit that day when a worker motioned me towards the door. They were about to feed the babies. Would I like to help? And keep in mind, I am a 21-year-old in this, so I don't know that I'd ever fed a baby before, so I was very happy to help. So I walked down the hallway, and I entered the baby room, and as I entered, I saw a line of babies lying in a row in front of me, and they were swaddled and silent, like tiny little mummies. So she handed me a bottle of formula as a baby let out a low wail of protest before rooting for the bottle. The worker had finished feeding her bottle and reswaddled another baby by the time I was done. She was much quicker than I was. Curious about the process, though, I had watched her swaddle him. And if you don't know what swaddling is, it's basically wrapping babies very tightly in blankets. But as she swaddled him, I noticed the baby's arms and legs aren't supposed to be that skinny, are they? Where's the muscle? Where's the fat? But after eating, the babies lay silent once again. And as I prepared to leave, I noticed an older child alone in a crib. She was in a coma, lying so still that the trace of death already marked her. She was almost flattened on the sheets, as if her bones had been absorbed into her flesh. And I know that's a very visceral picture, but it's so important for us to understand really how devastating this scene was for me. So I reached out to touch her because I wanted to somehow comfort her even in that coma, but I was chided by the worker. "The girl will be gone soon," she said. It was not good to touch her. Then she motioned for me to leave the room. So reluctantly, I walked away. I got on my bike, and I entered, again as the story began, the deluge of man-powered and motorized wheels to go back to my apartment. I looked the same after that visit, and yet my heart and my mind were fundamentally changed. So you may ask, that's a very, very serious story, and you may ask, well, what does this have to do with economics? Or what does this have to do with my life and my struggles? Well, it actually has everything to do with that. Because you see, this particular nation made an economic decision many years ago. It was called the one-child policy. And this policy was based on a fear that the population was growing too large and that national resources needed to be directed towards economic growth and not basic human survival. So that was a simple decision, right? Just tell people to only have one child for the good of the economy. But that one economic decision unleashed a cascade of human suffering. People were sterilized. Girls and children with disabilities were given up for adoption or aborted or placed in orphanages like the one I just visited. And why did that happen? Well, because families only had one shot to have a child who would take care of them in their old age. Hence the need for orphanages like the one that I visited. But I am not telling you this story to give myself or others some kind of moral high ground. Instead, I share this story to illustrate a simple truth. Economic systems can either benefit humans or cost humans. And systems that require you to choose some ideal economic outcome over intrinsic human value can be the most disastrous systems of all. But I'm not going to end my story there. Fast forward 20 years, and I now understand the importance of this story in a global context. All systems, including monetary systems, as in you use a monetary system because you use US dollars. All of those systems must be equipped with checks and balances to diversify power and control. Again, so one unilateral decision about what was best for the economy will not result in human suffering the way that that one did. Our value as human beings demands those types of checks and balances. So my question for you is, does our current monetary system have the checks and balances that we need for continued human flourishing? If not, what options do we have? And I'm sure you know my answer, because anyone who's coming to this podcast or our social media channels will know that we are exploring the Bitcoin monetary system as a solution. But we'll get into that later on Prosper Project Podcast. So until then, don't forget, human beings are the most valuable resource on earth, including you. Like, subscribe, and follow for more content, especially as we dig much deeper into systems, economic and monetary, and the impact that they have on all of us. Thanks for watching.